Her grandmother never talked about the Depression directly. She talked around it. She talked about the summer they ate nothing but beans, about the neighbor who walked 8 miles to stand in a bread line and came home with nothing, about her father selling the truck so the bank could not take it, about the particular silence of a house where the adults were afraid. Marisol grew up in Guadalajara hearing these stories as family mythology, the time before everything. She came to the United States on a student visa at 21, married, settled in Phoenix, and 17 years later sat down with the citizenship study materials for the first time.
When she reached questions 103 and 104, she stopped. The Great Depression, the stock market crash of 1929. She had known this story her whole life without knowing it had a name, a date, a place in American history that the government considered important enough to test. She called her mother that evening and told her, "The things grandmother used to talk about, they are in the citizenship test. They are part of American history now. They are part of my history." Questions 101 through 110 cover the most turbulent 40 years in modern American history. 2 world wars, the longest economic crisis in modern history, the beginning of the Cold War, the leaders who guided the country through all of it. Let us begin.
5 questions from last time. Answer out loud. Name the U.S. war between the North and the South. Answer: the Civil War. What did the Emancipation Proclamation do? Answer: freed the slaves in the Confederate States. What amendment says all persons born or naturalized in the United States are citizens? Answer: the 14th Amendment. When did all men get the right to vote? Answer: after the Civil War, during Reconstruction, with the 15th Amendment, or in 1870. Name one leader of the women's rights movement in the 1800s. Answer: Susan B. Anthony, Elizabeth Cady Stanton, Sojourner Truth, Harriet Tubman, Lucretia Mott, or Lucy Stone.
If any of those tripped you up, go back to episode 10. Everything connects. And the stronger your foundation, the more the answers in today's episode will make sense.
Why did the United States enter World War I? The United States entered World War I because Germany attacked United States civilian ships and to support the Allied powers against the Central Powers. World War I began in Europe in 1914, triggered by the assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand of Austria-Hungary. Within weeks, a network of alliances pulled most of Europe into the conflict. On one side were the Allied powers, principally Britain, France, Russia, and Italy. On the other were the Central Powers, led by Germany and Austria-Hungary. For 3 years, the United States tried to remain neutral. President Woodrow Wilson won re-election in 1916 partly on the slogan, "He kept us out of war." But Germany's policy of unrestricted submarine warfare, attacking any ship in war zones, including civilian and neutral vessels, was killing Americans. The sinking of the passenger liner Lusitania in 1915 had killed nearly 1,200 people, including 128 Americans. Germany temporarily suspended the policy under American pressure, but resumed it in 1917. In the same period, British intelligence intercepted the Zimmermann telegram, in which Germany proposed a military alliance with Mexico against the United States. Wilson asked Congress to declare war in April 1917. American troops, resources, and industrial capacity helped turn the tide. The war ended with Allied victory in November 1918. So, if you are asked, why did the United States enter World War I? Any of these answers is correct, because Germany attacked United States civilian ships to support the Allied powers or to oppose the Central Powers.
When did all women get the right to vote? All women got the right to vote in 1920 after World War I, with the ratification of the 19th Amendment. The fight for women's suffrage in the United States had been ongoing for more than 70 years by the time it succeeded. The Seneca Falls Convention of 1848, organised by Elizabeth Cady Stanton and Lucretia Mott, had first formally demanded women's voting rights. Decades of organising, marching, petitioning, and in some cases imprisonment followed. The experience of World War I accelerated the movement. Women had contributed enormously to the war effort at home, working in factories, nursing the wounded, and managing households and farms, while men served overseas. The argument that women could bear the burdens of a nation at war, but not be trusted with the vote, became increasingly difficult to sustain. The 19th Amendment was ratified on August 18, 1920. It declared that the right of citizens of the United States to vote shall not be denied or abridged on account of sex. It was a victory that had taken generations to achieve, and it represented the largest single expansion of voting rights in American history. So if you are asked, when did all women get the right to vote? Any of these answers is correct. 1920, after World War I, or with the 19th Amendment.
What was the Great Depression? The Great Depression was the longest and most severe economic crisis in modern history. It lasted from 1929 to approximately 1939 and affected countries around the world. In the United States, the scale of the collapse was staggering. Unemployment reached nearly 25% by 1933. Banks failed across the country. Families lost their savings, their homes, and their farms. Factories shut down. Entire communities were hollowed out. The human cost was immense. Hunger, homelessness, desperation, and a deep fracture in the confidence that the American economic system could protect ordinary people from catastrophe. The Great Depression did not only devastate individuals and families, it reshaped the relationship between citizens and their government. Franklin Roosevelt's New Deal programs created new federal agencies, constructed infrastructure, put millions of people to work, and established the basic social safety net that still exists in the United States today, including Social Security. The Depression taught the country that markets could fail catastrophically and that government had a responsibility to respond. For the Citizenship Test, the key answer is that the Great Depression was the longest economic recession in modern history. But understanding what it was, how it felt, and what it changed is what makes the answer memorable. So if you are asked, what was the Great Depression? The correct answer is the longest economic recession in modern history.
When did the Great Depression start? The Great Depression started with the Great Crash, the stock market crash of 1929. On October 24, 1929, known as Black Thursday, panicking investors began selling shares in massive volumes. Over the following days, the market continued to collapse. By the end of October, the Dow Jones Industrial Average had fallen by more than 30%, wiping out billions of dollars in value and shattering confidence in the American economy. The crash itself did not immediately cause the full depth of the depression. A cascade of consequences followed: bank failures, collapsing farm prices, industrial shutdowns, and a contraction of the money supply that turned a severe recession into a decade-long catastrophe. By 1933, unemployment had reached nearly 25%. One of every 4 workers in the country had no job. The stock market crash of 1929 is the event that marks the beginning of the Great Depression because it was the moment the fundamental confidence of the economy broke. Everything that followed flowed from that break. So if you are asked, when did the Great Depression start? Any of these answers is correct. The Great Crash. The stock market crash of 1929 or 1929.
Who was president during the Great Depression and World War II? Franklin Roosevelt, known as FDR, was president during the Great Depression and World War II. He served from 1933 to 1945, longer than any other president in American history. Roosevelt took office at the lowest point of the Depression, with unemployment near 25% and the banking system on the verge of total collapse. In his first 100 days, he launched an extraordinary series of legislative programs, the New Deal, that stabilized the banks, created federal employment programs, established agricultural supports, and began building the social safety net. He communicated directly with the American people through radio broadcasts known as fireside chats, projecting calm and resolve at a moment when the country desperately needed both. When World War II began in Europe in 1939 and Japan attacked Pearl Harbor in December 1941, Roosevelt guided the United States into the war and oversaw the extraordinary mobilization of American industry and military power that helped defeat both Nazi Germany and Imperial Japan. He died in April 1945, just weeks before Germany's surrender, and did not live to see the end of the war he had led his country through. The 22nd Amendment, passed in 1951 after Roosevelt's unprecedented 4 terms, limited future presidents to 2 terms. So if you are asked, who was president during the Great Depression and World War II? The correct answer is Franklin Roosevelt, or FDR.
Why did the United States enter World War II? The United States entered World War II because of the bombing of Pearl Harbor to support the Allied powers and to oppose the Axis powers. On December 7, 1941, Japan launched a surprise attack on the United States naval base at Pearl Harbor, Hawaii. The attack killed more than 2,400 Americans, wounded nearly 1,200 more, and destroyed or damaged much of the Pacific Fleet. President Roosevelt called it a date which will live in infamy. The following day, Congress declared war on Japan. Days later, Germany and Italy, Japan's Axis partners, declared war on the United States. The Allied powers, including Britain, France, the Soviet Union and others, had been fighting Germany and the Axis since 1939. The United States had been providing support through programs like Lend-Lease, but had not entered the war directly. Pearl Harbor ended that neutrality. American forces fought on 2 fronts simultaneously, in the Pacific against Japan and in Europe against Nazi Germany and its allies. The industrial capacity of the United States, producing ships, aircraft, tanks and weapons at a scale the world had never seen, was decisive in both theatres. Germany surrendered in May 1945. Japan surrendered in August 1945, following the use of atomic bombs at Hiroshima and Nagasaki. So if you are asked, why did the United States enter World War II? Any of these answers is correct. The bombing of Pearl Harbor to support the Allied powers or to oppose the Axis powers.
Dwight Eisenhower is famous for many things. Name one. Dwight D. Eisenhower, known as Ike, is famous as the Supreme Allied Commander in Europe during World War II, as the President at the end of the Korean War, as the 34th President of the United States, and as the President who signed the Federal Aid Highway Act of 1956, creating the Interstate Highway System. As Supreme Allied Commander, Eisenhower planned and led Operation Overlord, the D-Day invasion of Normandy on June 6, 1944, the largest amphibious military operation in history. The success of D-Day opened the Western Front in Europe and was a decisive turning point in the defeat of Nazi Germany. He was elected the 34th president in 1952 and served 2 terms from 1953 to 1961. He oversaw the armistice that ended the Korean War in 1953, managed the early tensions of the Cold War, and presided over a period of significant economic growth and suburban expansion in the United States. His signature domestic achievement was the Interstate Highway System, 41,000 miles of highways that transformed how Americans traveled, lived, and conducted commerce. Attorney Chris M. Ingram notes that Eisenhower's life is one of the most remarkable in American history. A Kansas farm boy who became the commander of the greatest military operation ever mounted, and then twice led the most powerful country on earth. So if you are asked, Dwight Eisenhower is famous for many things, name one. Any of these answers is correct. General during World War II, President at the end of the Korean War, 34th President of the United States, or signed the Federal Aid Highway Act, creating the Interstate Highway System.
Who was the United States' main rival during the Cold War? The United States' main rival during the Cold War was the Soviet Union, also known as the USSR or Russia. After World War II ended in 1945, the 2 superpowers that emerged were the United States and the Soviet Union. They had been wartime allies against Nazi Germany, but represented fundamentally opposed systems: American democracy and capitalism on one side, Soviet communism on the other. Neither side wanted a direct military confrontation that could escalate to nuclear war. Instead, they competed through proxy conflicts, arms races, economic competition, space exploration, propaganda, and political influence around the world. This sustained geopolitical competition, intense but stopping short of direct warfare between the 2 superpowers, became known as the Cold War. It shaped international politics, American domestic policy, military spending, education and culture for more than 4 decades. The Cold War ended with the dissolution of the Soviet Union in 1991, widely seen as a victory for the democratic and market-based model of governance. So if you are asked, Who was the United States' main rival during the Cold War? Any of these answers is correct. The Soviet Union, the USSR, or Russia.
During the Cold War, what was one main concern of the United States? During the Cold War, the two main concerns of the United States were communism and nuclear war. The Soviet Union was a communist state, and the United States feared the spread of communism to other countries, particularly in Europe, Asia, Latin America, and Africa. This fear drove American foreign policy for decades, leading to interventions, alliances, and the strategy of containment, the effort to prevent Soviet influence from expanding beyond its existing borders. Nuclear war was the other defining anxiety of the Cold War. Both the United States and the Soviet Union developed enormous arsenals of nuclear weapons capable of destroying civilization. The doctrine of mutually assured destruction, the understanding that any nuclear exchange would annihilate both sides, was what prevented the Cold War from becoming a hot one. But the knowledge that this possibility existed, that the world could end in a matter of hours, was a constant and deeply unsettling feature of daily life for anyone who lived through the era. So if you are asked, during the Cold War, what was one main concern of the United States? Either of these answers is correct: communism or nuclear war.
Why did the United States enter the Korean War? The United States entered the Korean War to stop the spread of communism. In June 1950, Communist North Korea, backed by the Soviet Union and later China, invaded South Korea. The United States, acting under a United Nations mandate, led a coalition of forces to defend South Korea and prevent the Korean Peninsula from falling entirely under communist control. The Korean War, which lasted from 1950 to 1953, was the first major armed conflict of the Cold War era and a direct application of the containment strategy. The United States would use military force, if necessary, to prevent communism from expanding into new territories. The war ended in an armistice in July 1953, not a formal peace treaty, leaving Korea divided along roughly the same line where it had been before the war. That division between North and South Korea remains in place today. The Korean War is sometimes called the Forgotten War because it has received less historical attention than World War II or Vietnam, but its consequences, a divided peninsula, a permanent American military presence in South Korea, and the establishment of the containment doctrine as the basis of American foreign policy, were profound and lasting.
The law offices of Chris M. Ingram notes that understanding this timeline matters for the citizenship test, not just as a list of names, but because each conflict reflects a moment when the United States made a choice about what kind of role it would play in the world.
So if you are asked, why did the United States enter the Korean War? The correct answer is to stop the spread of communism.
You have just covered 40 years of American history in one episode. 2 world wars, the worst economic crisis in modern history, the beginning of the nuclear age, and the opening of the Cold War. These are the events that shaped the world Marisol's grandmother lived through, and the world every new citizen is inheriting. Now let us see what is stuck. Pop quiz. Answer out loud. Why did the United States enter World War I? Answer: because Germany attacked U.S. civilian ships to support the Allied powers to oppose the Central Powers. When did all women get the right to vote? Answer: 1920, after World War I, the 19th Amendment. What was the Great Depression? Answer: the longest economic recession in modern history. When did the Great Depression start? Answer: the Great Crash, the stock market crash of 1929. Who was president during the Great Depression and World War II? Answer: Franklin Roosevelt, or FDR. Why did the United States enter World War II? Answer: the bombing of Pearl Harbor to support the Allied powers, to oppose the Axis powers. Dwight Eisenhower is famous for many things. Name one. Answer: general during World War II, president at end of Korean War, 34th president, signed the Federal Aid Highway Act. Who was the United States' main rival during the Cold War? Answer: the Soviet Union, the USSR, or Russia. During the Cold War, what was one main concern of the United States? Answer: communism or nuclear war. Why did the United States enter the Korean War? Answer: to stop the spread of communism.
Several questions in this episode are best remembered as pairs. Question 103 and question 104 go together. What was the Great Depression and when did it start? Question 101 and question 106 go together. Why did the US enter World War I and why did it enter World War II? Question 108 and question 109 go together. Who was the rival during the Cold War and what were the concerns? Practice them as pairs and the answers will reinforce each other. For question 105, Franklin Roosevelt is the only president in American history to serve more than 2 terms. That fact alone makes him memorable, and it explains why the 22nd Amendment was passed after his presidency, limiting future presidents to 2 terms.
And if there are still immigration steps between where you are now and the naturalization waiting room, the law offices of Chris M. Ingram has been helping people navigate those steps for over 20 years. From EB-1 and EB-2 green cards to O-1 visas and beyond, their team has guided thousands of professionals and families all the way to the citizenship interview. You can learn more and request a free consultation at breakthroughusa.com.
Marisol passed her naturalization interview on a Tuesday morning in Phoenix. The officer asked her 10 questions. She answered all 10 correctly. One of them was about the Great Depression.
She called her mother from the parking lot. She said, "I passed." Her mother said, "Of course you did." She said, "They asked me about the Depression, about when it started." I knew the answer before he finished the question. Her mother was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "Your grandmother would have liked knowing that."
The history that was passed down as family memory, the beans, the bread line, the silence of a house full of fear, had become part of the official civic record of the country Marisol now fully belonged to. Some history lives in textbooks, some lives in families. The Citizenship Test asks you to know both.
You have now completed questions 101 through 110. 10 more answers locked in. 10 more steps toward the moment everything changes. We will see you in the next lesson. Keep going. You have got this.